Welcome to day 7. We are going into blue color this time. I hope that you have got your warm and your cool blues ready because we are gonna dive in to painting the Scabiosa. Scabiosa. Well, this flower. Yeah, so let's start painting, and I can't wait to show you how it's done. These are some of the supplies that I'll be using. If you are new to my channel, welcome. My name is Jillian and I want to share with you the mess and magic of watercolor. Let's begin into today's tutorial. In today's video, we are going to be painting the Scabiosa, and this wonderful looking tissue-like flower is really what attracted me, and I want to just capture something really loose, something really abstract. And we're going to once again be filling up the page with just blue flowers, so we're just going to be focusing on blue. What I have on my desk is my 100% cotton paper in A4 size. Then I've got my palette here and I've got my brushes. Now I love using my flat brush, but you are allowed to use whatever brush that you like. Make sure you've got 2 cups of water and your paints are activated. Now the palette that I have here is basically a limited color palette that I've been trying out. These are all colors from the 12 color wheel, and I'm in this process of kind of figuring out and learning more about colors, which is why I have a color palette like that. You are welcome to use whatever blue that you fancy, because I believe that everyone has got a different perception of color, so choose whatever blue that you love best. Now the blue that is reflected here in this flower is kind of pale and almost moving towards purple. We're just going to capture, like I said, a loose form and in whatever interpretation that you find is best. So I'm going to try and get that bluish purple, and this is where I am getting my ultramarine blue here, and I'm getting a really light wash, mixing it slightly with my mineral violet, and straight away I get this lavender color. This flower has got very jagged edges when it comes to their petals, so you can see that I'm wriggling my flat brush around kind of to mimic that jagged edge. I am just placing the entire floral outside shape on my paper first, and I'm moving on to the second flower doing the same thing. So what I've noticed is that the color I originally intended to be was more blue, and I can see that it has a slight purple tinge to it, so I've gone in to add some Holbein lavender shade instead, which is a little bit more of a blue shade. Try not to worry too much about your first layer. This is going to be kind of a road map to how your flowers are going to look like. And then we're going to go in and add some shadows where I am using a slightly darker color value. So this means that I've got more paint pigment on my brush as compared to water. My painting is currently damp or slightly wet, so it means that when I put down color, it's going to bleed and there's going to be some really nice soft blends. This is the effect that I want, and it's why I'm going in while it's still wet. I find that the shadows of flowers often appear around the edges of petals or at the center of the flower. So here are those 2 spaces that you want to focus your darker color values at, so that it looks a lot more cohesive and the viewer can find exactly where the center of the flower is. The challenging thing about painting in one color is that sometimes we don't know how to tell the viewer where to focus on, especially since everything is in one color, and this is where you want to adjust the amount of paint and water ratio on your brush so that you get different darkness and lightness of color, because I think the contrast between dark and light is going to pull the viewer in different directions. At the same time, the floral center is going to be the next space to help the viewer to have a focal point. These flowers have a slight greenish tinge to the center, so I'm actually using a sap green that is mixed with a little lemon yellow, so it's a slightly brighter green, and I'm putting it down in the centers. To create a slight tad of highlight, what I've done is I've picked up some phthalo blue and I'm adding them just along the edges of some of these petals. I think they add a little bit of fun and interest to the painting, but I'm not doing it too much because I want the petals to still stand out. Hey, I know we're getting into the details right now, and I don't know what your watercolor journey is like, but I want to remind you that sometimes videos might not be pegged at your level, and I think that that is the tricky spot that I was in when I first started watercolor. I don't want you to feel too discouraged by what you're experiencing, whether it's what you're putting on paper or how it's starting to look. But I want you to try pushing forward anyway and just try out whatever that you are seeing, and you never know what you can get unless you try. So keep going. I recommend pulling out your stems with a small round brush, and as much as possible, try and do it in one swift stroke. Try not to go over the same area and pull that one line, because you're gonna get some of that dabbing marks and that line is not going to be really smooth. One way to get really nice long thin lines is to make sure that you're using your forearm or your wrist instead of using your fingers when you are painting long lines. I noticed that there's a small bud that is popping out just by the side, and this is where I am creating that from those small little lines that you see. I'm really enjoying drawing out these long leaves. It's so nice because they kind of elongate the whole flower and it creates a lot more movement. You get to get some of these S shapes or C curves as you're doing the leaves. I often go back to my leaves and add in a slightly darker color value just to create that depth. I think it also creates this illusion that your leaves or your stem is slimmer just because you've added in that darker color value. I have to admit that when I started and I looked at this flower, my impression was that I was really just going to let the paint do the work for me and let it look a lot more blobby than how it looks right now. I have definitely added in a lot more definition and detail to the flower, like at the petals and things like that. But I would want to encourage you to use the reference photo on your own in front of you as a guide so that you decide what details you want to have and not, and don't get bogged down by what exactly you're seeing me doing, because this is the whole point of doing a challenge with a reference photo in mind, so that you can break down the reference photo and kind of get a sense of how exactly I'm tackling it, starting with the petals or starting with the center and all of that. To break the momentum of those three flowers just on the left hand side, I thought it would be fun for us to create one really loose one just on the top right hand corner. And this loose one has the least amount of detail because I don't want every flower to have every single detail, otherwise it can be very overwhelming for the viewer. I'm just adding in a couple of shadows and some marks just to indicate that there are some petals there and there's a center. You can see that by adding some of these random lines and squiggles, as long as they all lead to a center, kind of gives the viewer a sense of a flower. If you have come this far, thank you for joining me step by step as I showed you my start to finish process of how we painted today. Now, one of the things that you would have noticed in this painting is that I started with a really light wash and I slowly started to add and build layers. Now, I know that over the last few days, you would have seen that one of the trends that I do when I paint is that I love using layers. And I find that there are so many different ways of painting. While your painting is still wet and you add in color, it's going to create blending effects. And that's also a different or another approach that you can take to painting flowers. So while you are following my process, I also want to help you to see that there are many different ways in which you can approach painting from a reference photo. So this is where I would encourage you to also have the flower color guidebook, because that's going to help you to see the shapes of the flowers, and it's also going to help you to have more direction when you are painting. I cannot wait for us to paint again together, because the next time we meet, we're going to be painting more blue flowers.